Dorico 4.1 has been released, and as the 0.1 name suggests, it's only a small change. It's not a drastic update, but it does include a few nice features which we're going to take a look at in this video, and it also adds back a few things which were maybe removed as part of the transition to 4. So let's head off into Dorico and take a look. So here we are in Dorico 4.1, and the key editor is where we're going to start, because I think that's where the meat of this update really is. The key editor is pretty important to me because I really come from a sequencing background rather than from a traditional notation background. And I find that the key editor is really useful often for me to either check what I'm doing or to make improvements to how things sound, etc. So let's dive in and take a look at the dynamics editor. So here we are, going to make use of the split between the right page and having the key editor at the bottom. You probably would spend a fair bit of time with it in the play mode and having it here because you can certainly use more space, particularly because you can probably take up most of it here. But I just want to show you a few things which I quite like about this. So firstly, anything which we create here in terms of dynamics will be reflected in the dynamics editor. So I'm just going to switch over to dynamics here. And at the moment you can see there's nothing happening here. But as soon as we add something, so let's just add a static instruction with a P at the very beginning. And we can see that P appears here. And let's add an F here. And as you can see, we get this dynamic change here, which is a static dynamic change. So that's one element, and it's reflected here. Now you can edit these, so if you're not happy with the playback in terms of the way that this changes, if you want it to be more, you can just grab this point, move it up, and you'll get more than you originally got with that. But obviously you can't go too far with this depending on what your overall dynamic range is, but it's quite nice to have access to that and be able to change that and have that override what Dorico comes up with by default. Now, as soon as we add what's often called, a hairpin, but here we've got this crescendo here. So you can see this has got this green area here, and you've got that crescendo. Now, you can control this pretty easily, so we can click it and we can move it around. So if I wasn't happy with that, I wanted to move that later. And you can see that these two are moving in concert with each other, which is quite nice. So because we've got this F and it getting louder afterwards, we can make that longer, and you can adjust both the dynamic change and the timing of it nice and easily here. So depending on how you want to alter that, you can either do it here as you would do traditionally, or you can do it in the key editor, which is again a quite nice thing to be able to do. You can move these up and down, or you can move them left and right. You can't do both at the same time. So you can see here it's moving horizontally, there it's moving vertically, but generally that works pretty well. Now these end up with a green background, but it is also possible for you to draw in dynamics which aren't represented in the score. So here I can create a line, and you can see we've got this blue line here. So this will be represented in the playback, but it won't show on the score. So you can see nothing has appeared in this area of the score, even though this is increasing. That works reasonably well. Again, you can edit those, move these points around, play around with them at will, etc. Now, one thing that's interesting is that the blue manually entered dynamics override any dynamics which are created as a result of score entry. So, for instance, if I just highlight this and then move this over that, you will see that green part has disappeared, but importantly, the notation hasn't. Now, if you move that back out of the way, it can pop back into existence, but it will depend on the situation. I've had a couple of times where the work that I've done has completely destroyed this. So I've drawn things on top and then it hasn't come back. But as you can see, in that particular instance, it was hidden behind there. And once we uncovered it, so let's do that again. You can see it's covered up there, but if we uncover it, it pops back. One thing which isn't present at the moment, which might be nice, would be the ability to alter these dynamic instructions directly in the key editor rather than needing to do it in the right page. That's not present at the moment. Maybe that will be in a future update, but I don't know about that at the moment. There are a few slightly interesting things here, one of the things that I've noticed is if you make the time of a crescendo 0, disappears from the score, but when you put it back, it comes back again. I'm not sure whether that's actually useful, but it does that at the moment. Closely related to this is the MIDI CC Editor, so let's take a look at that next. So to look at the CC Editor, we're just going to add CC1, so I'm just going to click Add Automation, and then from the menu, which appears all the way up here, I'm going to pick 1 modulation, which will be nice and straightforward. Now, one of the things which has been changed is it's possible to add much more information, much closer together than previously. So the resolution of this editor has been changed significantly. So now you can just draw in your MIDI data to your heart's content and play around with it in any way you like. And you can see it works much more responsively than it used to be. Certainly in the previous version of Dorico, it was a bit of a slow experience. And while you can see there is a bit of a gap between me letting go of the mouse and it changing, it's much better than before. Another nice touch here, which I like, is that we see the differences in what will actually be played back. So if you've got something where you've got a drop like that, if we zoom in on it, this is one area where I really think this needs some work, is that the zooming, it seems to scroll back at will, etc. Is this resolution? So this is the actual, looks like this is the actual playback time resolution. So it will be updated here and updated here, etc. We'll have to see if it's possible to improve on that resolution, but certainly that's what seems to be happening at the moment. It's also possible, in case you weren't aware, to change whether or not points, step. So you can see here, if I select a given point, and then hit that, it will stay down until the next point, or it will interpolate between them, etc. Another area in the key editor is the velocity editor. So let's just take a quick look at that. So here we are in the velocity editor, and now it's possible to edit the individual velocities of notes in a chord. Now, the process here is similar to a number of other editing techniques in Dorico, where once you have something selected, if you want to select something else, you need to select nothing first and then select the item in question. So I'll show you what I mean. So for instance here, if we select here, we will select the lowest velocity note in this chord, and I can move that velocity up and down so you can see that number being reflected there. Now, if I want to select this here, if I click on it directly, it doesn't work. What you need to do is to click off and then click on this, and now we're editing this particular note. Again, click off. I can now click on this one, and so on. So it just takes just a little bit of finessing and maybe undoing some muscle memory, because in most DAWs, you can just click on a new item and select it. And you can see here, I'm actually clicking here and nothing is happening because we've got this selected. So if you find yourself getting a bit frustrated with some of these elements here, you might find that that's what you need to do, is just click nothing and then click the thing you want to select, and then you should be in business. Another area to do with playback is it's possible to edit velocity in the notes and rest parts of the property panel here. So for instance, here I've got a note selected and I can alter its velocity here. So if that particular note is something where I want to change the velocity, I can do that there. So let's just make that 127 so it will stick out like a sore thumb. And if we go back to the editor, we can see that that's been changed to 127. And if I edit it here, set it to about 33. If we go back here, you can see that's reflected there. So this is just another way to edit this, which is fairly useful. It's always nice to have multiple ways to edit those kind of things, particularly if there's something in particular you need to do. Another area which has had some work is the tempo editor. It's only a small change, but let's take a look at it. So the tempo editor has got a range max. So in other words, maximum amount of tempo you would want in your project. Now, this is pretty useful because 250 is often way too fast for most of the projects that I'm interested in. So let's remove it. Let's put it down to 150. And now it's going to be much easier to adjust this to the kind of range that you're interested in, rather than having to do it over the default much larger range. This is saved per project, so once you've set that, that will stay with that project, which can be pretty handy because obviously some projects will need something much lower, some will need higher. Playback has seen a few changes. A couple of the notable things are that you now get frequency and the multiband compressor included. So if you are a Cubase user, you will already have these. But if you're not, then these could be a useful addition. So for instance, let's just take a quick look at frequency. So I'm just going to add this as an insert. So this is a reasonably powerful EQ plugin. There's quite a lot you can do with it. It's something which has existed for a while in the Steinberg world, and there is actually a full video on it on the channel, which is linked in the description. But in short, this is a fully featured 8-band EQ with dynamic processing for your EQ band. So if you want to improve the quality of your mixing, and obviously, of course, if you know what you're doing with this, then this is a really useful tool. It's certainly a vast improvement on sort of just bog stock EQs, particularly in terms of dynamic EQ, which can be really, really useful. Now, the other plugin, which again won't be new to anyone from the Cubase world, but may well be new to you if you are coming just from Dorico, is the multiband compressor. Again, this falls outside the scope of something that I'd want to do in this kind of review, but this will allow you to compress each band of audio individually. It comes with a reasonable range of presets if you just want to load up something and experiment from there. But there's quite a lot to multiband compression. It's a moderately complex topic, but as long as you don't go too far in terms of compression on each band, you shouldn't go too far wrong. But also it's something which it's easy to go a bit mad with. Another area which has been improved is the ability to print flows in terms of print range. So rather than just doing, all pages, etc., we've got flows, and then we can choose which flows we're going to print out. So in this case, just the first and the third ones. This can make printing out complex projects for players much simpler and easier and quicker, which of course is what computers should be all about. There are a few new options in terms of colours. One of them, which is quite interesting, is inverting colours for music. So if we apply that, you will see in the background, suddenly we've got sort of dark mode for music. It'll be interesting to see who makes use of that. It certainly looks quite strange to me, but then I've got used to using dark mode on my computer, so maybe I will get used to using dark mode in terms of scores. And in terms of colours, another area which has been improved is it's now possible to choose voice colours and also other colours, so highlighting, etc., the kind of things which are part of the user interface. And if those colours don't make sense to you, you can now change them. Certainly not something that I've spent a lot of time wishing about, but if it's something that bothers you and you wish to colour code it to work with the way that you work, then you've now got the option to do that, which is pretty nice. The MIDI pitch bend editor has seen a couple of small but hopefully useful improvements. So firstly, there is a horizontal line where the 0 point of pitch bend is, which is always useful, particularly if you're trying to draw this in. And secondly, there's a change in terms of it applying some quantization. So here's a little curve which I've just created. Now, if we select this and were to move it, you'll see that it actually can snap to the center point. So if I move this a bit, you'll see that these points, you can see them snapping. So look by the cursor, you can see it's quite flat. Now, if you hold down the command key while you're dragging, or the control key on Windows, then that won't happen. So that snapping, if you like that, you can just let that do that. So often you find you might have a bit of residual pitch bend, particularly if you've drawn it in. So this can be useful for ensuring that that goes to 0. And obviously you don't have to apply it to the whole thing. So if I just undo that, I can, of course, just apply it just to this end. So just to make sure that that last bit is at 0. So now we've got no pitch bend there, and you're not going to have any weird pitch offsets. So that's quite useful. So there you have it, my view of Dorico 4.1. Now, coming from a DAW background, the key editor was always going to be of the most interest to me, but actually I genuinely think it's not just my bias, that's the biggest change which has been in there. There are lots of other changes which are in many ways to do with more esoteric notation options, etc. But obviously if those are the things that float your boat, then this is going to be well worthwhile. I strongly encourage you to download the version history and see all those updates, because there's hundreds of bug fixes and loads of little features. And again, every time you read one of those documents, you might find something which is just right up your street and you wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. Overall, I find Dorico 95% satisfying and maybe 5% a bit frustrating. There's some things to do with the user interface, as seen earlier on in the video, where having to click off, having to click back on just seems a little bit annoying. Yeah, maybe to me it's annoying. And some areas of the way things expand on screen, etc. Just maybe it's because it's the touch interface. Maybe it's because I'm an old dinosaur who started using Cubase 3 million years ago. And maybe it's my advancing years and lack of neuroplasticity. I just find it just a little bit annoying. But having said that, it's not so annoying that I want to change, because it's got so much power and I've produced transcriptions, etc., which look absolutely perfect and really don't take long to create. So on that side of things, it really is excellent as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful, and if you have, please like, subscribe and discuss, etc., because it really helps the channel out in terms of getting it recommended to other people. And hopefully we'll see you again soon for more Music Tech Tuition.